Mataji, 7:25 we will start. Mataji, we'll give another 3 minutes.
Sure, Mataji. Can you hear me nicely?
Yes, Mataji, we can hear you nicely. Hare Krishna, Mataji. Can we start, Mataji? So, welcome to Bhakti Sangha. Again, we are having another session with Isopanisad, 18 verses and 18 weeks. So, today we are seeing verse number 3. Her Grace, Preethi Vilasini Mataji. Thank you so much, Preethi Vilasini Mataji, for your valuable time. We are waiting to hear verse number 3 from you, Mataji. Please take over.
Thank you so much, Mataji. So we are very happy to be continuing our series on Sri Isopanisad. And as Mataji already mentioned, it is going to be verse number 3. We'll start with the prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschaya Kadeshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So before we get into today's verse, we will first have an overview of what we have seen so far. Anyone remembers what the invocation verse was about? Anyone wants to take a guess? I can give a clue. It had the word Purnam.
Lord is complete.
Lord is complete, yes. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. So we saw how the Lord is complete, and anything and everything that emanates from the Lord is also complete in itself. But in spite of so many complete wholes emanating from the Lord's power or his position or his qualities never diminishes, right? So he always remains the complete whole. So, having defined the glories of that supreme absolute truth, who is the source of everything, next verse we talk about the living entities. What should the living entities do in this world? So, we saw that the living entities should accept only the quota that is given to them. So, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat, right? So, we should accept only what is given to us. And once we understand that and live properly, then then our life is successful. So that is what we saw in the first verse of the Isopanisad. Now, the second verse of the Isopanisad says that we have to live like this in the principle of Ishavasyam. And we also saw the definition of karma, akarma, and vikarma. So what is karma, what is akarma, and what is vikarma? Would anyone like to talk about, define karma, akarma, and vikarma?
Yeah, Mataji, can I go?
Mm.
Karma means the activities that we are doing, good or bad. Akarma means there is no any good and bad. We are doing on the for the satisfaction of the Lord. Vikarma is the bad activities, sinful activities. You know, Mataji, if I said wrong, correct or wrong.
Very nice. Thank you, Mataji. So we saw what is karma, akarma, and vikarma. And karma is to live by the Ishavasya principle. So that's how the verse 2 and verse 1 were connected. Now, we have to see what happens to those who perform vikarma. Okay. So what is their destination? So that is the focus of this verse, which is the third verse. So this was the summary of our previous class. It's a summary chart that defines karma, vikarma, and akarma. So karma, spiritual duties performed for material elevation, and from that we get to go to the heavenly planets, as she had already explained, as Vanita Mataji also just touched upon. Then vikarma is impious activities, and we saw the example of Dhritarashtra, how he, because of vikarma, actually he had to suffer. And then finally, akarma, which is service to the Lord. So you're dovetailing all your activities in the service of the Lord, and because of which you neither accrue any profit nor loss. You know, there is no karma. Basically, it doesn't bind you to this material world. And we saw the example of Mrigari. So that is what we saw in the previous verse. So now we are going to head on to verse number 3, which is the destination of the soul killer. So that is the focus of this verse. So first let's read the verse and then we'll get going to understand what this verse is telling us. Asurya namate loka andena tamasashrata tamaste pretya bhigachanti yeke chatma hano janaha. Asuryaha means that which is meant for the asuras. Nama, famous by name, te, those, lokaha, planets, andhena, by ignorance, tamasa, by darkness, avritaha, covering, tan, those, planets, te, they, pretya, after death, abhigachanti, enter into, ye, anyone, ke, everyone, cha, and atmahanaha, the killers of the soul, janaha, persons. So if you see this verse, it begins with Asurya Nama Te Loka. So which is the loka that is meant for the asuras. Asuras. Okay, so that's how the sentence begins. Asurya Nama Te Loka Andena Tamasavritaha. So it is a place of darkness. Which is the place meant for the asuras? That place is Andena. Anda means you all know who's blind, right? Basically, Anda is ignorance. So Andena, and what is it? Tamasa Avritaha. Tamasa is ignorance and Avrita is covering. So the location meant for the asuras is Andhena and Tamasa Avrita. Then it says, Tamste Pretyabhigachanti Yeke Chatma Hanojana. So such people, abhigachanti, they enter into, where do they enter into such places after death, after pretya, which is after death, and these people are actually the killers of the soul. Now let me ask you a question. What have you learned from the Bhagavad-Gita about the soul? So can someone kill the soul?
No.
Okay.
No, Mataji.
Okay, what are some of the qualities of the soul? Anyone knows? Like, it can neither be burned like that. What we have learned.
Yeah. It is eternal. Soul is eternal.
Yeah.
No, as you said, it cannot be burnt or it cannot be cut into pieces. Yeah, Mataji.
So it cannot be burned, it cannot be wet, it cannot be cut into pieces, it cannot be killed by arrows. So when we say all this, what do we mean by Atmahana, meaning killer of the soul?
Who is not giving value for the soul, they're not working anything regarding the soul. Like I work, I'm eating food so that my body is in progress, it is healthy, but what I'm doing for my soul, I'm not doing anything for my soul if I don't practice Krishna consciousness. That means I am making my soul to be dead. It is not active.
Fantastic, very nicely put, Mataji. Thank you so much. So the translation is, the killer of the soul, whoever he may be, must enter into the planets known as the worlds of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance. So this is talking about the killer of the soul. And as she just explained, killer of the soul means one who's not giving any importance or value to the existence of the soul and just ignoring the soul completely. Such a person, he goes to a place that is full of darkness and ignorance. Such a faithless person goes to a place that is full of darkness and ignorance. So that is what this verse is talking about. Okay, so now we are going to churn this verse and see a lot of examples and try to understand this verse in great detail. So this verse talks about whom? Atmahanas. Atmahanas means killer of the soul. And Mataji already explained to everyone what is the meaning of Atmahana. So before we understand who is Atmahana, we have to understand the classification of Suras and Asuras. Okay, so there are two classes of people. One is Sura and the other is Asura. Sura means those who are constantly, who are very godly. You must have heard this, right? that you've definitely heard of the term asura. Asura are the demons. That's what you've heard from different scriptures like the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-Gita. And the opposite of asura is obviously sura, who are the godly people. So this is something you all know. Now, let's see a little more about sura and asura. Suras are the ones, actually, the correct understanding of who a sura is one who's fixed at the lotus feet of the Lord. So that is the right definition, because if you see in the Rig Veda, it says, Tad Vishnoho Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Surayaha Purusha Suktam. So who are the suras? Who are Sada Pashyanti. What are they seeing? Sada, what are they seeing? Sada means continuously. Pashyanti means to see. So what are they seeing? Tad Vishnoho Paramam Padam. They are continuously fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord. Paramam Padam, Vishnu. They are continuously seeing the Supreme Lord. So such a person in the Rig Veda is called as a sura, meaning who are turned towards the Supreme Lord. The opposite of sura is asura. Asura means who are turning away from the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Right? Now, what are the qualities of these asuras? These asuras, they are wasting their life in addiction to different worldly pursuits. So we are all in this material world, and each one of us have something that we are after in this material world, right? We have so many pursuits. So asuras, generally, they are continuously focused only on material pursuits, and they are wasting this human form of life just focusing on that. And because of that, they are continuously bound to the cycle of birth and death. So if you're very materialistically attached, and if we are not worrying about the soul, the Atma, then obviously our desires are going to pull us into this material world, and we are going to take birth after birth, and we are going to be entangled in the cycle of birth and death. So our desires are continuously maintaining us in this world, and we are after material enjoyment, and asuras have no knowledge about the soul or God. They are neither interested in self-realization to know about the soul, nor are they interested in God realization. They have no interest to develop their relationship with the Paramatma. So this is the definition of asuras. So asuras have turned away from the Supreme Lord. They're completely engrossed in materialistic life, and they have no interest in God or Krishna consciousness or self-realization. However, this human form of life is very, very precious. Okay? It is very precious. As I already said, we are all in this material ocean, right? Ocean, the samsara sagara. It's a very, very difficult ocean to surpass. But, if we have a captain in the ship who's very intelligent and who knows what to do during a heavy storm in the middle of the ocean, he can steer the boat and he can take us to safety. So this is the analogy given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are all in this ocean of birth and death. The ship or the boat is like our body. Okay, the body is carrying us in this ocean of birth and death. We all need an expert captain, okay, who can actually take us to the destination of the lotus feet of the Lord. And who's that expert captain? That expert captain is the spiritual master. So we must understand that we must utilize this boat that is there in the middle of the ocean appropriately. This boat has to be steered by the right person, and we must go to the right destination, which is the lotus feet of the Lord. But asuras, they are missing the point. They have completely forgotten about this, and they are just stuck in this ocean over and over, and they are not reaching the right destination. So here are two stories that gives us an idea of how a sura would behave and how an asura would behave. Okay, so you all know the story of Hiranyakushipu and Prahlada Maharaj. We recently celebrated Narsingh Chaturdashi. Prahlada's mother's name was Kayadu. When she was carrying Prahlad in the womb, the demigods became very, very scared. Okay, why were the demigods scared? They were very worried because Hiranyakushipu was such a demoniac person, and somehow the demigods had concluded that the child born to Hiranyakashipu will also have demoniac qualities. So they thought that from Hiranyakashipu, another junior Hiranyakashipu would be formed. So when Kayadu was pregnant, the demigods, they wanted to capture her, and they decided to actually get rid of the child that she would give birth to. Okay, so that was their plan. However, Narada Muni, he intervened. He intervened and he advised the demigods. He told the demigods that the child in the womb of Kayadu is not going to be like his father. He's going to have very saintly qualities, and he will be a great devotee of Lord Hari. So when Narada advised the demigods, what do you think the demigods did? Did they wait for Prahlad and did they kill Prahlad, or did they harm Kayadu when she was pregnant? What actually did the demigods do? Anyone knows? What did, don't you know the story of
Mataji, but demigods wanted to kill Kayadu, right? But Narada Muni comes and stops. That's what I know.
Yeah. So then what happened? Did they kill or did they not?
No, they did not kill. They did not
They
kill.
did not kill her. Yeah.
They did not kill. So which means that the demigods listened to the advice of Narada Muni, right? So they turned towards the Supreme Lord. They turn towards the Supreme Lord when it is needed. It is not that they turn away from the advice of the Supreme Lord or his representatives. So they may be small mistakes that even suras make. Okay, everyone makes mistakes. Even godly people can make mistakes, but they are always on the side of the Supreme Lord. There is another example in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the churning of the milk ocean. So during the churning of the milk ocean, who listened to everything that Lord Hari said? It was the demigods. When the Supreme Lord said, first go and catch the mouth of Vasuki, they first went and did that. Okay, they just listened to whatever Krishna said. And then the demons, they immediately opposed. They said, no, we want the mouth. So now Lord Hari said, okay, let's go to the tail. Immediately, the demigods followed whatever the Supreme Lord said. So that is the quality of suras. That's why we saw in this verse Sada Pashyanti Surayaha. So whatever the Lord desires, that is how the suras behave. The asuras, however, on the other hand, they do quite the opposite. Like, for example, we have the story of Ravana from the Ramayana. Now, Ravana, he had great advisors. Even Maricha, who was actually, kind of the first time Maricha met Lord Ramachandra, Lord Rama, he shot an arrow and kicked out Maricha several yojanas away. Maricha survived, okay? Subahu was killed, but Maricha survived. The Maricha survived so that the Ramayana could continue. But when Ravana called Maricha and told Marich that you should go and you should, go in the form of a golden deer and you should be responsible for kidnapping Sita and separate Ram and Sita, at that time Maricha said, no, I will not do it. Initially, at least, he said no. And he gives some very good advice to Ravana. He tells Ravana, don't do this. I have seen Ram when he was 12 years old. And now this Ram has come with Sita. Okay. He is with his eternal consort. So he's going to be much more powerful. And Lord Ram is not an ordinary man. I know that for a fact. So please don't have this lust towards Sita. He actually advises Ravana to constrain himself and not get involved in this wrongdoing. But however, Ravana actually blackmails Maricha and sends him. And finally, Marich decides that it is better to die in the hands of Lord Ram than live as your associate. That's the decision that Maricha takes. So Ravana, though he had good advisors, he always thought in terms of going against the Lord. Okay, so that was his nature. The same thing happened with his brother Vibhishan. His brother Vibhishan was always very righteous. That was the nature of Vibhishan. So Vibhishan also gave him this advice. He kept telling both Ravana and Indrajit, that they should actually behave themselves and they should give back Sita to Ram. That is the best thing that one can do. But Ravana refused to listen. He in fact said that Vibhishan, though he is his own brother, he is actually an enemy in the guise of a brother. And he kicks Vibhishan out of the assembly. And of course, Vibhishan leaves him and he goes to surrender to Lord Ramchandra. So demons, they think, that they are independent, okay? And they turn their face away from the Supreme Lord. And even if their own well-wishers are coming and giving them the right advice to do the right things, still demons, they never ever budge. So that is the nature of an Asura. So you see the qualities of Asura that were mentioned. They waste their lives in addiction and worldly pursuits. That is what Ravana's whole focus was. His whole focus was somehow he wanted his lust to be satisfied. And all that he wanted was excessive enjoyment. And he had no knowledge of the soul or God, or rather he was not interested. He was not interested in using his life in the right way. And he did not establish the correct relationship with the Supreme Lord, Lord Ramchandra, who was rightly present there, who was very much present there. Okay? So having said the definition between Suras and Asuras, we must understand that this human form of life that is awarded to us, okay, should be utilized properly. So we must not waste this human form of life and become Asuras. We must utilize it nicely. How do we utilize it nicely? We utilize it nicely for self-realization. Why? Because this human form of life is very, very precious. It is on the higher rung of the ladder. Okay, to attain this human form of life, we have gone through several species of life, and we have transmigrated over and over since time immemorial. And finally, we have attained this human form of life. And this human form of life is very, very special because we have all the facilities that is needed. Okay, we have everything that is needed in this human form of life. It is more valuable than animal life. Just think about animals, okay? Just think about a lion, or just think about a rat, okay, for that matter, or just think about a rabbit. So the animals, to secure their food, okay, they are in constant fear, in constant fear. The deer is in constant fear that the tiger is going to attack it when it's eating grass. The tiger is in constant worry that someone else is going to capture, some other animal is going to capture its prey. The rat is in constant fear that he will get stuck somewhere when he's trying to procure his food. So like this, these animals, they are generally, the focus of life is sense gratification, right? Animals, they should eat nicely and they should protect their lives. That is their focus of life. So animal life is actually very, very difficult. Human beings, we are given a much better situation where we have the right intelligence and we can procure what is needed for our sustenance. Of course, we accept that not everybody has excellent living conditions, but still our lives are much better than what animals actually get in a natural way. Even if we live in the most, constrained situations, in the most difficult situations, still there is no fear, when you have a plate of prasadam or you're just doing your basic human activities. So human beings are being given much better facilities so that they can discharge their duties. This is a big advantage of human life. This example Prabhupada gives in the purport. He says, if you see a CEO of the company would be given much more facilities than a simple clerk in the company. Why is it that the CEO is given more facilities? Because he has to discharge duties of a higher nature. Okay, he has higher responsibilities. He has to discharge duties of a higher nature. So he's given better facilities than a person who's a simple worker in that company. Similarly, We being human beings, we are given much better facilities because we have a higher responsibility. If we are using our life just like animals, doing it in a more polished way. Animals are also eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. If we also do that in a more polished way, but we're doing the same activity, then what is the big difference between animals and humans? As human beings, since we are given this wonderful body, we should use it for the right purpose, which is the self-realization. Use it for the right purpose of self-realization and God realization. However, what we are doing in this world as asuras is that we are just doing the same four activities in a more polished way and increasing the problems of hungry stomach, always threatened by unemployment. These are the words used by Srila Prabhupada in the purport. And it's actually very important to understand this. Actually, all of us, in the guise of, I have to feed myself, right? That is the motto of, oh, I have to go to work because I have to feed myself, I have to feed my family, I have to get shelter. So that has become the focus of life. That has become the focus of life. And even while trying to execute that, even while trying to procure food, in the name of getting an employment, going and working and getting food to feed our family or ourselves, even in that process also, we are constantly threatened by Maya. Prabhupada says he's always threatened by unemployment because all of this is artificially created. Actually, the Lord provides for everyone. But, it is human nature to artificially create a web of unwanted requirements, and then we get stuck in that web. So that is what is happening to us. And an asuric person would actually be focusing only on the material wants, and he would forget what is really human life meant for. So Prabhupada often gives this analogy that a dog runs on 4 legs for sense gratification, satisfying his needs. And we humans, we are just running on 2 legs for the same purpose. So that is the only difference between the dog and the man. The dog has 4 legs, but we have 2 legs, and we end up doing the same thing. So now we have seen the difference between suras and asuras, and we have seen in more detail that human life is very, very important, and we should not just be wasting it on sense gratification. Of course, we need to, feed ourselves. We need to do all the basics, but we should not forget what human life is meant for. Human life is definitely meant for self-realization, and that should not be in the backseat. Okay, we should not forget that. That should be in the forefront. So now Krishna, he tells us in the Bhagavad-Gita, okay, we are all trying, each one of us, we are trying. Not everyone is 100% asura. Yes, we have material wants, we are all trying. And we also try and, try in our own little ways to attempt for self-realization. Now, what happens if your attempts are unsuccessful? Meaning you've started attempting for self-realization, but you have not perfected your life in this world. Then what happens? Anyone knows this verse from Bhagavad-Gita 6:41, or at least the meaning of 6:41?
Mataji, I can say this, Luka.
Yeah.
Prapya punyam krita.
Prapya punyam gridalogan Ushita shasvato saman Shujinam srimatam Ke yoga brasto pajayate Vijayate. Thank you, Preethi Vilasini Mataji.
Thank you so much, Vrunda. That was very sweet. Yes. So the verse says that if you have tried a little, if you've made a little attempt and you've not been successful in this birth, in your next birth, you have the opportunity to be born either in a family of pious people or in a well-to-do, wealthy family. So you can either be born in the family of Brahmanas who are already pious and who have some sukriti, and you can take up from there, or you can be born in a place where the people are kind of well-to-do, Vaishyas who are well-to-do, and you're just picking up because your basic needs are met. Okay, there is no hunger and basic problems, hunger, shelter, all that is covered, so that you can focus on Krishna consciousness. So that is the point. Even if you try a little bit, and even if you become unsuccessful, there's actually no harm, because in the next birth you will pick up really fast. And in the Bhagavad-Gita itself, it also talks about people who are even more advanced. People who are even more advanced, they take birth in the family of transcendentalists. And Srila Prabhupada gives his own example in the Bhagavad Gita for that. So like that, the different facilities is given. Okay, so even if you take up Krishna consciousness, even a little bit, it goes a long way. That is the point. But however, if there is no attempt made, such people are called as Atmahana, meaning killer of the soul. And they end up, this is their destination, they end up in hell. They transmigrate to different demoniac planets. They take birth in degraded species, and they live a life of darkness and ignorance. So that is what this verse is actually talking about. This verse is talking about Atmahanas, people who are the killer of the souls, people who do not make even a little attempt. These people are actually going to go to hell. And among these, especially the Asura, these people, they are called by different names. One way of calling them here is Atmahanas, because they're killing their own soul or the purpose of human life. They're also called as Asuras because they've definitely turned away from the Lord. And another word used to describe them in this purport is Atma Sambhavita. That means they're thinking themselves to be the greatest, even better than God. So these Asuras, what are they doing? They are making a show of religiosity, but they are aiming only for material prosperity in life, and they are not understanding that the Lord is the supreme proprietor. They are not employing the Ishavasya principle in their life. They are thinking themselves to be very, very great. Because of their efforts, they think they are, the Lord of everything, and they are so great. And they are thinking they are great because of their efforts or because of the votes of others. Because of this, they consider themselves to be the supreme authority, and they are not making any progress. They end up entering into the darkest regions of ignorance. So classic example again for this is Ravana. We're not going to leave Ravana today. So Ravana, Prabhupada says in the purports of Bhagavad-Gita, when he talks about Asuric nature, he tells that Ravana had a desire to build a staircase for heaven. He thought he's the greatest, everything is in his control. He did not accept the principle of Ishavasya. He did not understand that the Lord is the supreme proprietor, and he was thinking he's everything. So he decided, why are you people wasting time doing yajnas and pleasing demigods? All this is not needed. Let's build a staircase to heaven. So he attempts to build a staircase to heaven so that he can directly go to heaven. So this is the principle, or this is the nature of people who are demoniac. They are completely bewildered, and without the proper knowledge, they are actually gliding toward hell. So he's trying to build a staircase to heaven, but actually he was gliding simply towards hell. And Prabhupada says that they are creating a web of illusion around them. So here you see a picture of a girl who is cocooned. So the silkworm is a classic example. The silkworm builds a cocoon around itself. Okay, so it creates, from its glands, it creates this nice silk thread, and it forms a cocoon within itself. But what happens, unfortunately, of course, after some time, it has to release itself. It has to make a hole through that cocoon, and then the moth should come out. But unfortunately, what has happened, the greedy people, they take that little silkworm who has formed a cocoon. Actually, he's weaving a web of death around himself, and they make silk out of it directly. So this is the examples of people who are gliding towards hell. So they are actually paving their way towards destruction. So the example of Ravana, as well as the Mohajala example that you see in this picture, are quite relevant to explain the destination of Asuric people. There are two stories that describe about the destination of people based on the activities that they perform. The first story you're all very aware is the story of Kailash. It's a very famous story told by Srila Prabhupada. And it's worth, remembering the story to remind ourselves that we should not get entangled in such asuric tendencies. There was a man by the name Kailash, and he was very, very attached to his family. He was only interested in materialistic things. He was not interested in self-realization. However, Narada Muni, who is the greatest well-wisher of everyone, he went and told this man Kailash that he should actually focus on Krishna consciousness and he should come with him to Vaikuntha. But Kailash refused. He said, no, I have my children. I'm very attached to my children. I should see that my children get married, so I cannot come now. So then Kailash, he asks Narada Muni to go away, and he tells Narada to come back later after a few years, after his duties are complete. So after a few years, what happens? Narada Muni again, he comes back and he reminds Kailash. He tells Kailash, okay, now your children are married. Now it's time for you to come. So can you please come with me? And Kailash says, no, my children are married, but now they have grandchildren. I want to have fun with my grandchildren, so I'm not coming now. So again, Narada Muni is sent away and he's asked to come after a few years. Now, a few years go by and the grandchildren have become bigger, and Kailash has lost interest in playing with his grandchildren. So now Narada Muni asks Kailash, okay, come with me now. At least I think all your duties are complete. You should come with me. But then Kailash says, no, I'm not ready to come now. I have so many other duties to take care of. My children, they are squandering their wealth. It's going to be very difficult without me. So I should stay here. I have this great property. I should take care of this property. I'm not coming now. Over a period of time, what happened? Kailash, it was time for his death. So when it was time for his death, he transmigrates and he becomes a dog. Okay. And because he was very attached to his house, he takes birth as a dog. And what happens in the dog's body? He's guarding his house because he was very attached to the wealth that he had. So when Narada Muni came back after a few years and he saw Kailash, is it you? He said, bow, bow, bow. Yes, it's me. I am Kailash. And Narada Muni tells him, what are you doing in a dog body? Why don't you come with me to Vaikuntha? At this time, Kailash says, even if I'm in a dog's body, I'm very worried about my wealth. My children and my grandchildren, they're not taking care of my wealth properly. So it's my duty to guard my wealth and make sure everything is all right. And time went by, the dog also died. And Kailash now takes the form of a snake. Okay. Why? Because he's very attached to that place and he knows that his children had some farms, some fields, and the grains there had to be protected. These children, they took care of the wealth now, but they were not taking care of the field and the farms. So they would wake up very late, and before they would wake up, many thieves would come and take away the grains, and the animals would squander all the grains in the field. So Kailash takes the form of a serpent and he guards the fields. So now Narada Muni comes again and he tells Kailash, well, where are you? What are you? Are you the snake? And then he's hissing and he's saying, yes, I am Kailash and I'm taking care of the fields. So then Narada Muni realizes that this, we living entities, we just get entangled over and over and we never learn our lesson. We are never ready to leave, our so-called artificially imposed responsibilities. That's how we human beings or even every single living entity is all about. So now Narada Muni, he makes an idea. What he does is he attracts the attention of all the sons and the grandsons, and he shows that the snake is there. He starts making some noise to indicate that the snake is there. And when they all come and see this dangerous snake, they want to kill the snake. So the sons and the grandsons, they take sticks and they try to beat up the snake. But the snake is hissing and trying to convey to them, I am your father Kailash. Why are you harming me? I'm here to guard you. But you think the sons and the grandsons would understand that? They don't understand anything. And they finally end up killing this. So it's a very sad story. Of course, Narada Muni, he helps him out and he's taken back to Godhead by the mercy of Narada Muni. But still, the point here is that we are very stubborn. We have this network, we have this illusion that we have to do this, we have to do that, we have this responsibility, that responsibility. All that is true. We have all the responsibilities. Yes, we must continue to perform our duties, but we should not forget the ultimate goal of life, because after all, this human form of life is meant for self-realization and God realization. We should not put that in the backseat and forget the goal of life. There is another story. In the story of Kailash, we see that he was transmigrating, right? That is what was happening to him. He was transmigrating from one life to the other, and he was reaching darker and darker conditions. So this is the nature of a person who's asuric. If he's not focusing on self-realization, this is what happens to him. So it's applicable to each one of us. We should always keep the story of Kailash in our mind and think twice. Am I spending sufficient time in Krishna consciousness? Is my consciousness being preserved properly? So these are some questions we need to ask ourselves on a regular basis. One more story is there, and this is the story from the Gita Mahatmya of the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. There was a great Brahmana. His name was Jada. Okay, great, but his name was Jada. The reason his name is Jada is because though he was a great Brahmana, he was from a Brahmana family, he was wasting his life. He was wasting his life in drinking, smoking, and, sense gratification, accumulating wealth, and he never studied the scriptures, or he never engaged in a righteous life. He was always after money. So once what happened, he was visiting a place to gather a lot of money, and he gathered a lot of money. And when he was returning, he decided to spend the night under a tree with all his money that he had gathered. He was very, very, a materialistic person, and he had no interest in self-realization. So when he was spending the night under the tree, it so happened that a bunch of thieves came and they squandered all the wealth, and they also killed him. Now, when he died, when this Jada, he died, he ended up having a ghost body, because there were a lot of attachments that he had. So he was not able to get a human body immediately. And also he lived a very non-righteous life. So he ended up getting a ghost body. And his son was a very, very nice child. He had a very pious son. The son was very much into reading scriptures. Owing to his Brahminical background, he would read scriptures, and he would spend his time worshipping the deity, and he had a very pious lifestyle. So when the son heard that his father was actually killed, he became very, very upset. He went around searching and asking people as to how this incident could have happened. Finally, he meets an old man who explains to him about the details of his father's death. And he tells him that when your father was traveling through the forest, he decided to spend the night under a tree. The dacoits came, they squandered him, and he was murdered. So when the son hears about the story of his father, he decides that he should go to Gaya to perform Shraddha for his father, so that his father would be relieved from a terrible condition, because he could understand from scriptures that a person who has led his life in such a way doesn't receive a good destination. So he goes, he starts walking towards Gaya. So when he decides to walk towards Gaya, he passes through the same forest, and he sits under the same tree that his father was killed. So sitting under the same tree that his father was killed, this little boy, he reads the chapter 3 of Bhagavad-Gita. So he recites all the verses of chapter 3 of Bhagavad-Gita. And as he finishes reciting the verses from the Bhagavad-Gita, this father of his, he immediately takes a 4-armed form. He's in the form of a ghost right now. But after the chapter reading is complete, the ghost who was hearing the verses of chapter 3 immediately transforms into a 4-armed eternal associate form of the Supreme Lord, and he proceeds to Vaikuntha. So this is what the story is trying to tell us. The story is telling us that if we are wasting our time doing things that are not relevant in Krishna consciousness and living a very, very, asuric lifestyle, this is our destination. However, even a little bit of help that we can get from wonderful scriptures like Bhagavad-Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, from a guru or from a pious person can take us a long way, okay, can really, really help us. Like what happened to Jada. After he heard the third chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, immediately he assumed his spiritual form and he ascended to Vaikuntha. And eventually, the boy himself, he could realize this and he continued to read the third chapter. And he was able to even relieve some of his other ancestors because the father requests him, please continue to read the third chapter. There is another brother of yours who has wasted his life. If you read the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, even he will attain the spiritual world. And some of your other ancestors are also stuck in this world. So please release all of them. He makes a request. And this boy continues to read the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and he relieves several of his ancestors. And not only that, he himself also goes back to Godhead. So that is the power and potency of Krishna consciousness. In the story of Kailash, what did we see? We saw that Narada Muni was helpful. He was the one who kept reminding Kailash, please come, please come, please come. And somehow or the other, Narada Muni helped Kailash. And here in this story, we see that the son of the Brahmana himself, somehow or the other, just by the recital of this most wonderful scripture, the Bhagavad-Gita, he was able to actually relieve all his ancestors from such a horrible condition. So these are some glories of taking association of devotees. So it is very important for us not to waste our life, for us to engage our life in Krishna consciousness. And one thing that we can think of is, even if someone we know is wasting their time in doing, irreligious activities, or who's not interested in Krishna consciousness, if we can give a little bit of our association of the person who is more advanced, then even those people can be easily benefited. So that is the importance of human life. Human life is meant for self-realization. And human life, specifically Prabhupada writes, human life is meant to solve all the material problems. Now, this is quite a statement, because human life, material world itself means material problems, right? Bhagavad-Gita says, Dukhalayam ashashvatam. So how can you say human life is meant to solve material problems? How many of us have solved all the problems of material life? Anyone here? Nobody, right? We have one problem after the other. Today, I have a big problem where I've lost, I lose some money. Tomorrow, my car will be robbed. Day after, I have a new problem. So this goes on and on and on. So there is no end to the problems of human life. Then how is human life solving all the material problems? Anyone wants to take a guess to answer this question? How do you think human life is solving material problems?
We cannot solve material problems.
By staying in Krishna consciousness, we can just overcome all the problems.
Correct. Very nice. Yes, we have to develop devotional service, Krishna consciousness. We should utilize this human life for the right purpose. When we do that, we can solve the problems of human life, and actually we can attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death, okay? And we can attain eternal life in Krishna consciousness. Krishna is called as Mukunda, okay? He's called as Mukunda, who is the giver of liberation. So when we engage in bhakti, see, just doing karma will not take us very far. Just doing our religious duties is not going to take us far. From karma, we should learn to develop vairagya. Vairagya from what? Vairagya from attachment to material activities. And that is not possible without devotional service. So to attain vairagya, we need bhakti. Without bhakti, nothing can happen. So when we take up to devotional process, that is when this human form of life can become a solution to all the material problems. Bhakti is the actual solution to all material problems, and it is possible through the human form of life. So we should learn to solve the problems beyond the tottering platform of material life. That's how Prabhupada puts it. So in this material world, a solution to a problem creates a new problem. I work in an environmental industry where we come up with solutions to an existing problem. So you all know environmentally, there are so many problems, okay? Oh, there is global warming or forest fire, and then you will say contamination in the water. So like this, you have so many problems. And what is our job? To find a solution to that problem. But that solution will surely create a new problem. That solution is not a problem-free solution. That solution will surely have a new problem. And then to solve that new problem, you have to create another solution. Okay. And to solve the problem coming from that new solution, you create another solution. That's how this industry runs. So there is actually no solution to the material problems. The only solution is to use the human form of life in the right way, to use it in self-realization and the path of devotional service. And with the help of Mukunda, sever this entire cycle of birth and death. Okay, so solving problems, we have to solve the problems beyond the tottering platform of material life, because this material life is a tottering platform. It's an unstable platform. You keep trying to solve problems, it's not going to happen. It is only going to end up in giving new problems. But only when you connect to that Supreme Lord by the process of devotional service, then the real problems of life are solved. What are the real problems of life? Birth, old age, disease, and death. These are the problems of life. So these problems can be solved only by one formula, which is taking up to devotional service. So that's what this chapter was about. This verse was about. I'll summarize the entire verse. In the beginning of the verse, we saw who are asuras. Asuras are people who are after worldly pleasure, and they do not establish any relationship with the Supreme Lord, and they are considered as the killer of the soul, Atmahana. Human life is specifically meant for us to advance, and we saw the boat analogy that we are, our body is like the boat, and we are in this ocean of birth and death, and the spiritual master is the expert captain who can actually steer the boat and take us to the lotus feet of the Lord. We also saw the analogy of the officer and the clerk. Human form of life is very, very special because we are given better provisions. We are given a better condition to live in. And we saw how a CEO is probably given more facilities because he has more responsibility. Then we saw the different destinations. So some people who make even a little attempt, they are given facility in the next life. But people who make no attempt or make an attempt to become God, who make an attempt to become independent like Ravana, then these are the people who actually go down to hellish conditions. So we saw the examples of devotees taking rebirth and others who are suffering through the natural laws of karma. We saw two stories of Kailash as well as the story from Gita Mahatmya. So ultimately we concluded that the purpose of human life is meant to solve all the material problems for good by taking up to devotional service, which is actually the ultimate solution. So that's all for today. Any questions?
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you so much for the beautiful class. Very nice stories to understand.
Can I say something?
Who is,
I want to say something.
Yes.
Who is Asuras and Suras. Very nice stories, Mataji, and also what is the main goal of the human life. And this verse is very scary for me because this verse is not just telling like we see so many demons in the scriptures, right? Oh, we know they are demons, but this verse talks about everybody are demon if they are not being Krishna conscious or God conscious. So it is very scary. To for a non-devotee, if you say that if you are not practicing Krishna consciousness, you are demon, means it is like kind of shocking to them. So what is our position in the spiritual world or in in the outside world, if you are not practicing Krishna consciousness, ultimately our activities also are like kind of demonic activities, because we are trying to be lord over or envious of others or cheat others. When you try to be good and Krishna consciousness, then automatically our activities also are good. So this verse is very, very nice, Mataji. And but I have a question, Mataji. So you are telling that suras are the people who follow the rules that are created by the Lord, but there are so many pastimes that where suras are also trying to be envious of the Lord, and Lord comes and teaches them a lesson. So how do we understand that?
Yes, that's a good question. Very nice. So no one is perfect. First thing is, only the Supreme Lord is in Shuddha Sattva. Okay. The rest of us, though we say demigods are in the mode of goodness, we should understand that it's always a mix. They also have Rajoguna and Tamoguna. Okay. But predominantly they are in the mode of goodness. Predominantly they are devotees of the Lord. Predominantly they turn to the Supreme Lord. They also make mistakes. Okay. Nobody is perfect. First thing. Sometimes so when they make mistakes, the Lord still is willing to correct them, and they listen to the corrections. So that is the point that we have to take. In the case of Indra, going and trying to kill Kayadu's child that we saw, this was the example we saw, right? There, it is not that the demigods were so much in the mode of goodness that they didn't even want to harm Kayadu's child. They didn't even think about their position. They didn't even think about destroying Hiranyakashipu. No, they had all these qualities. They wanted to do that. But they would turn to the Supreme Lord, okay, for help. And if the Lord said something, they would agree to it. So that is something that we first put into our heads. And all of us have this quality. We have our own egos. We have our own agendas. But when the Lord has something specific to deliver to us, we bow down to the Lord. Now, your question is, sometimes they even, you can say, they even go against the Lord's wishes, right? That was your question. Like, for example, Indra, he wanted to test the Lord during the during the Govardhan Leela. And Brahma, he wanted to test the Lord during the Brahma Vimohan Leela, right? So these things are sometimes, so these are answered in two ways. One is definitely everyone is prone to mistakes, and we learn from our mistakes. And the Lord is somewhat more inclined to patiently teach us because we listen. Okay, so most of these demigods, they patiently take feedback and they correct themselves. Okay, so that is one point. Secondly, sometimes the Lord may also use his devotees to teach the world a lesson. So this is very common. Sometimes we only see mistakes on the part of Indra, especially Indra. I think he's the most, he's one of the persons who seems to be worse than all the demons as well. If you read scriptures, right? So he's often, his Indra case study is very common in all the scriptures. Why? And then at the same time, all the scriptures glorify him to be a deva and a great devotee of the Lord. Why is that? Because sometimes the Lord chooses his own devotees and he puts them in certain situations to teach the world a lesson. So that's how we actually see the great devatas. Same thing happens in the case of Bhishma. In the Mahabharata, actually Bhishma was on the side of Adharma. He was fighting on the side of Adharma, but Bhagavatam describes him as a great Mahajan. Why? Because sometimes Krishna chooses his own devotees, to play the role of a negative person so that the world can actually understand lessons from their life. So when we read the story of Bhishma, we understand if you go towards the side of Adharma, whoever you may be even the devotee of the Lord. Actually, he was the devotee of the Lord. But still, if you're on the side of Adharma, you'll be vanquished. So like that, the Lord chooses some of his devotees to teach us lessons, whoever you may be. Like, for example, this is interesting. Narsimhadev. We just celebrated Narsingh Chaturdashi, so it is relevant for me to take his example. When Narsimhadev appeared, and everyone was scared to approach him, finally Prahlada approaches him and he pacifies Narsimhadev. Then Narsingadev, he looks at all the demigods and the demigods offer him prayers. At that time, what he does is he chastises Brahma. Now, Brahma how he chastises Brahma, he says, "Oh Padma Sambhava," he calls him. That means he tells Brahma, "Oh my dear Brahma, who's born from the lotus that has come from my own navel." Okay. So he's telling Brahma, don't think that you are, you might be my child. Okay. You might be directly born from me, but don't take things too lightly. Okay. Don't give Hiranyakashipu such boons and then make it difficult for everyone. So he chastises his own child, saying that just because you're my child, it doesn't mean that everything is fine. I'll just let you, you can make any mistake you want. So like that, from time to time, the Lord chastises his own dear devotees to teach the world that don't take things for granted and don't think you can get away with everything. Okay. So twofold. One is not everyone is perfect. Okay. Predominantly, they might be in the mode of goodness, but they are prone to mistakes as well. Secondly, sometimes the Lord chooses his own devotees to teach the world an example. Okay, Mataji.
Yes, Mataji, clear Mataji. Thank you so much for wonderful examples. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Is there anybody having any questions, realizations? Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Ajay Preethi Vilasini Mataji, Koti Koti Dandavat Pranam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Gurudev ki jai. Vilasini Gopi, today I missed 20 minutes class, Mataji. I will hear after finish this class, Mataji. Please forgive me. As usual, very inspiring class, Mataji. Koti Koti Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you for your association.
Hare Krishna, Preeti, Dandavat Pranam. Such a beautiful class. As always, nice katha, by you. Very nice stories. Sometimes, I have not heard the details and you give the details so beautifully. So thank you for that. I just had one, comment, like something that came to my mind. Is it okay to share?
Yes, Mataji, please go.
Yeah, when you were talking of asans now, I was reminded how Prabhupada says, like this Pashugna and Atmagna. So Prabhupada says that Pashugna is in one sense better, but Atmagna is worse. Because, one sense is when we do not feed our own soul with Krishna Katha or Krishna conscious activities, we are Atmagna. But the other definition Srila Prabhupada gives for Atmagna is the person who stops or hinders another person's devotion service. So he is a big, killer of the soul, and he says you could even kill an animal, but stopping or hindering somebody else's spiritual progress, that you're a bigger murderer. You're an atmagna, you're a killer of the soul. Wow. So Prabhupada actually brings out this point. I think in Bhagavad-Gita or one of the scriptures, he says that atmagna is severe, more severe than pashugna. And so even like, for example, sometimes due to human nature, devotees, we also get, envious or, try to take, credit for something, or, sometimes in our own ways, we are trying to take up all these services and don't give others such opportunity. Things like this do happen in devotee relationships. But I thought it was a very good thing to keep in mind that, when we are stopping somebody else on the path of devotion, then we are worse, than Pashugna. So I just wanted to share this.
Wow, such a beautiful point, Mataji, you brought up. Thank you so much. Thank you for adding that. It'll be very instructive. Thank you.
Thank you much.
That's very interesting point, Mataji. Thank you so much, Shikshagiri Mataji. Is there any more realizations, questions? Okay. if there are no more realizations and questions, we can close the call for today. I would like to offer my obeisances to Mataji and all the assembled devotees on the call. Vancha kalpatarupyasya kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrind ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Her Grace Preethi Vilasini Mataji ki jai.
Thank you,
Lord,
Mataji.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for the beautiful class again. Closing the call, dear devotees. We'll meet next week with another verse.